Hello, my name is Liam, and in this video lesson I'm going to be explaining some of the contextual background of what and how communism works. And later my partner Christian is going to be talking about some of the parallels between communism and the Dutch resistance. When we hear the word communism, we usually think about the Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall, and things like nuclear warfare, instead of actually thinking about the actual ideological movement of Karl Marx and the subsequent creation of the system of communism. This is because all of the conflicts centered around political systems and how many wars and battles have been fought because of the differences in political thinking. I want to start off with a more broader form and creation of communism before we talk about some of the battles and the conflicts that such ideological movements have caused. And before we talk about the significance of the struggle and the ideology has brought about, I want to make sure you guys are clear on what communism and Marxist-Leninism is exactly. Communism is a socio-economic structure and political ideology that promotes the establishment of an egalitarian, classless, stateless society based on common ownership and control of the means of production and property in general. In political science, the term communism is sometimes used to refer to communist states, a form of government in which the state operates under a one-party system and declares allegiance to Marxist-Leninism or derivative of communism. Even if the party does not actually claim that it has already developed a system of communism, it still holds true to these beliefs. Marxism holds that a process of class conflict and revolutionary struggle will result in a victory for the proletariat and the establishment of a communist society, in which private ownership is abolished over time and the means of production and subsistence become the property of society. Essentially, Marxism is a revolutionary theory and communism is the established system once the overthrow is complete. Communism and Marxist-Leninism are all about the society over self, and differences can't really separate the two ideologies, just implementation can. Marxism is a system that analyzes the different aspects of a state where there exists no difference between the rich and the poor. And communism can be termed as a political system where all become one and the same. Communism aims at establishing a society based on common ownership which promotes equality and fairness. Marxism is a philosophy which bases itself on the materialist interpretation of history. It says that history was driven by the materialistic approach of people, which means that the life of a person was driven by what he needed to survive. The Marxist ideology is to prepare a society for communism and the system of communism. Philosophically, it would seem that Marxism is actually much more attractive than capitalism because of things like equality and fairness. However, history has proved that putting the system into practice isn't as perfect as it is on paper. The premise of communism is that power and resources are shared throughout society, and an inherent assumption here is that either all of the producers will have equal status or that those who have superior positions will not abuse their power. Both of these assumptions have been proven naive and have brought up important questions by some of the partaken members. How can all members of a social set be equal? There will always be someone smarter and someone who is less competent, or someone who simply just works harder. How can anyone prevent this former from manipulating and in the end abusing the latter? Similarly, how can we ensure that those in power will never abuse their privileges? Equality is harder to come by than it may seem. In Soviet Russia, this abuse of power was all too common. During the regime, an oppressive dictatorship was formed. The tension between communism and Western ideology was central to the conflicts like the Cold War and the Vietnam War, two conflicts that come on the heels of World War II. Communism was also a very attractive idea for many of the lower class and, interestingly, Jewish people. The idea of equality and keeping the higher powers in check was very inviting to many people in the 1920s and 1930s. In particular, during the years of World War II. Many people saw that supporting communism was one and maybe the only way of combating the rising fascist Nazis. Many of the resistance groups supported the Soviets and subsequently liked their views on political ideology. And then the Jewish people in particular were getting pretty tired of the anti-Semitic hate they were getting and the oppressive nature of everywhere they were experiencing. So they saw that the idea of equality in communism and Marxist-Leninism was also very attractive.
Thank you for that, Liam. Well said. Now, continuing on what Liam was saying, I want to focus more on how the communists, as well as many citizens, responded to the German invasion. Now, on May 17, 1940, the Dutch commanders had ordered a ceasefire, and the entire Netherlands had been occupied by Nazi Germany. The Netherlands had a policy of neutrality and had no recent experience with outside invading sources. Additionally, the Dutch royal family refused to accept the Nazi offers for protection under the Reich and fled to London. Once the royal family was gone, the Nazis had continued with their plan for takeover. The Nazis set up a puppet government and established a Dutch Nationalist Socialist Party. Dutch resistant members eagerly joined the government positions because it enabled them to keep an eye on the collaborators and to influence policy making. Immediately after the German occupation, an underground movement began to arise and many organizations started to form. Dutch resistance developed relatively slowly, but the event of the February strike and its cause, the random police harassment and deportation of over 400 Jews, greatly stimulated resistance. The Communist Party of the Netherlands was the first group in the country to start resistant measures. The Dutch communists began actively resisting more after the Germans invaded the USSR. As a result, some 2,000 communists would lose their lives in torture rooms, concentration camps, or by firing squad. The initial years of the German occupation were characterized by the removal of Dutch Jews from their homeland and harsh economic and political measures. Being a small country in terms of its geographical size, it was very easy for the Gestapo to enforce its authority. As the harshness grew, so did Dutch unrest and resentment towards the Germans. By the middle of 1944, there were 4 major resistant organizations in Holland, which conducted their own operations as they saw fit. Now, although many resistant groups did not agree 100% with each other in terms of ideologies, many described their discussions as not being about politics at all and mainly just focusing on the same enemy, which was the Germans. Unique to the Dutch resistant movement, the activities that the resistant groups engaged in were relatively non-violent, though attacks did infrequently take place. Much of the resistant efforts centered around forging ration cards, counterfeiting money, hiding Jews, forced labor candidates, and really trying to get information about the Nazi regiment. The Dutch resistant command and control hierarchy was very decentralized. Individual Dutchmen took it upon themselves to strike back, so the formation of small groups with no outside links was very widespread. With no central command, brave individuals took it upon themselves to recruit relatives, friends, and neighbors into resistant organizations, which many communicated through an underground network of newspapers. The dangers were exceptionally high. Being captured often resulted in being shot or sent to a concentration camp. The Germans retaliated with violence. Hundreds of police officers and SS soldiers moved in on the protesting strikers with orders to fire without warning at anyone causing trouble. A curfew was imposed under punishment of arrest. However, people such as school teachers, artists, and farmers joined in these resistant groups and continued to protest. The Dutch resistance made its mark with the collection of intelligence that was very useful to the Allies, and another portion was their helping of Dutch Jews escape, especially children. 9 organizations were created to do this, and they really specialized in hiding people. What provoked a major reaction in the Netherlands was the wave of arrest of Jews. The Dutch people could not tolerate this. The first arrests were greeted with solitary strikes, which the Germans reacted with brutality. Now, it is hard to evaluate how successful the Dutch resistance was because although the Dutch population conducted many demonstrations against the Nazis did achieve certain goals. For example, slightly more than 82% of the Dutch Jews were deported. Despite this, about 3,000 Jews were able to escape the Netherlands and go into hiding in neighboring countries. It is also important to note that the Dutch underground helped 25,000 Jews go into hiding, of which 16,000 went undetected. So, although the Nazis succeeded in deporting over 100,000 Jews, the Dutch resistance did attempt to hide about 25,000 Jews from the Nazis. Now, thank you for listening to our video, and I hope Liam and I left you with something that will be beneficial to your understanding of the assault.